Welcome back to Highly Respected. I'm your host, Scott Greer. Today I'm joined by my most important guest ever, the poster formerly known as Natsbowl Finland. He now goes by Blep Sama. He is a Finn, a known connoisseur of TikTok videos, and world famous for his content. Blep, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks, Scott. That was a really good introduction. I didn't think you'd go there with the TikTok videos.
Well, that's what people are known for. Your TikTok videos are very controversial. I see the replies. You'll post some young girl on there who's making some dance, and then there'll be hot debate over this about these are thoughts. I hate this, and people are having serious meltdowns. And they're all their people who are posting Giga Chad memes and saying like, I love women. So they caused a lot of controversy on Twitter. So some of our listeners may know that as well. But we have got a lot of topics to discuss. Unfortunately, we will not be talking about your TikTok videos.
Unfortunately.
Sadly enough, we might get around to it, but we'll see. He is an expert on the topics we are going to discuss today, besides TikTok. We will discuss extremely online Christians and European politics. Let's start with the extremely online Christians first. The New York Times published a glowing profile of this minor Twitter phenomenon last weekend, entitled "The Future of Christianity is Punk," and written by Tara Isabella Burton. It covered the weird Catholic Twitter subculture and how it somehow pertains to the future of Christianity. Burton, who herself is a weird Christian, defines her subculture as desiring a, quote, return to old school forms of worship as a way of escaping from the crisis of modernity and the liberal capitalist faith in individualism, unquote. The weird Christians reject mainline Protestant denominations that have allegedly watered down their faith, and the, quote, fusion of ethno-nationalism, unfettered capitalism, and Republican Party politics that has come to define the modern white evangelical movement, unquote. In other words, weird Christians claim to be religiously traditional, yet socially radical. Claims this is a real trend, and the friend she interviews proves this. Blep, you are a devout Lutheran who appreciates religious traditionalism. What do you think of this?
Well, I think it's sort of an unescapable consequence of modernity and the Twitter algorithm matching together like-minded people. It was, just as the My Little Pony fandom was created by the internet, the weird Catholic Twitter one was bound to happen
My Little
sooner or later. Yes, exactly. No, I mean, to be fair to them, I'll always start off with an olive branch. I don't have a axe to grind against the Catholic Church, despite what some of my detractors might say. But I appreciate what they're trying to do, and I can sort of understand when you're living in a meaningless life. You're being born into neoliberal late capitalism, especially what I imagine is what it's like to live in America. It's depressing, it's soulless, and it's lack of spirituality, and a lot of mainline Protestant denominations in the West have they've dropped the ball, they've failed, and people who have this searching for spirituality, they have a legitimate drive for finding this higher purpose in life. Now the problem comes in when you have people who are not very well adjusted to society, who are, frankly speaking, autistic and annoying and usually fat, and they go on the internet and they have a struggle to connect to normal people, and then they go out and try and preach Christianity to people, and there you have the phenomena of what I call the eCaths. They're usually converts to Catholicism from a Protestant denomination, or should we say reborn Catholics who were raised nominally Catholic, never really got into it, and then discovered it past adolescence or in adolescence. And they go off the rails with the zealous nature of a newly converted person. They go out and they hammer it home from behind of there was a like Catholic saint, usually Thomas Aquinas avatar, and
Yes.
beat you over the head.
Or a Crusader
Heretic,
Knight.
you're-
You know, it's usually one or the other.
Yes, exactly. Don't forget many Vatican flag emojis in your
Oh yeah,
handle.
Vatican flag. You got to have it. It's an essential part to the
Yes.
to the online identity.
And then Mother Mary as your banner, and then you just select name, Saint, Catholic, something, convert, and bio. What do we call it? The bio? Just call it the denomination square, where people post what
Yeah, they'll always
denomination
put it's
they're
like Catholic. They'll put the flag and they'll just do everything like that. And they do have this whole. It is a little weird because people are getting online and adopting identities. Now, there is like some differences. A lot of the people you're describing would fit more neatly into the online right wing. You know, they might be a little goofy and misguided, as you were saying. They're generally part of the right wing, and they have all the right politics and everything like that. Some of the things they post are, they occasionally post some stuff that are pretty cringe. What the New York Times is discussing was like a almost upper crust of trads, the ones who look down upon the lower tier 20-year-old Discord converts who are like, oh, they haven't read the books, and they're far more leaning to the left. I mean, they're in the article, it makes it clear. I mean, they support racial justice, quote unquote, racial justice. They're all about mass immigration. They pretty much share everything with the left, except for when it comes to abortion and supposedly sexual promiscuity. But I know some of these people, and they aren't really living out that angle either. And it's a bourgeois liberal pretense of saying that, like, look, I'm finding the eternal, the traditional, and I'm revolting against liberal modernity and everything like that. But they are situated within the liberal upper class. Like, the liberal elites don't really find them much of a threat as compared to you saying, like, I think we need to reduce immigration, or you being a nationalist or anything like that. They view these people as less threatening, even though there were a lot of liberal critics who were going after the subject matter of this article. There were some feminists who were saying that the left is embracing sexism because of these folks, even though these folks are have an extreme women respecting to a degree, and they deny any masculine features. They're like, we need to be more feminine. A lot of these people say that. And also some people were even saying that this is too white, which is true, but that is really embarrassing to these people because they're very definitely not right-wing nationalists or anything like that. And they do have but they're both similar because, as you were saying, that a lot of these people were raised as mainline Protestants. A lot of them were actually raised as evangelicals, and they bring an evangelical attitude to Catholicism or to Orthodoxy or whatever. Is like you were saying that a lot of these are Catholics, but two of the people, well, the writer herself and one of the people interviewed is actually a high church Anglican.
Yes.
And a lot of the worst people you think are like Catholics, they turn out to be high church Anglicans. But it is like adopting a niche brand of Christianity. And I'm not even sure it is like claiming that this is like the future, like the future of Christianity is punk. It's very anti-evangelical. It claims that modern evangelicalism is like ethno-nationalism. Like, I was like, I want to live on this planet where that exists, because the largest Protestant denomination in America is the Southern Baptist Convention, and it's very conservative, and it's very evangelical in its style. Yet it always finds every opportunity to denounce racism and say, we love immigration, we want more of it, we want amnesty. They passed like this really unnecessary resolution against the alt-right, I believe, in 2018, and we're saying like white supremacy is the original sin of the country and all this stuff that is clearly showing that they're not ethno-nationalists. And it is like it is a way that we're Christians would even say this about evangelicals. It's a way of signaling that they're not like the bad Christians that you see on TV that are praying with Trump and aren't down with immigrants. Like we love immigrants here. We love weird immigrants in the weird Catholic Twitter community. We're just not like them.
There's something you said there that really resonated with my own personal experience with these people, and that's saying that it's sort of a very like a bourgeois way of rebelling is converting to Catholicism. This is something I've noticed myself, is that these, should we say, people from a very, very liberal background, from a wealthy liberal background, converting to Catholicism, and they might have dipped their toe usually in alt-right politics because they want somehow to rebel against the system, but they more often than not end up on the Catholic side of things, and then they do a full 180, just as our friend Mecca Donald in that article said, that he now finds the right-wing Twitter to be repulsive. I've seen this, like, personally, this change of a guy who does racist podcast in 2016, 15, and is part of the TRS scene, and then he goes over, converts to Catholicism, and now is running a Catholic Discord where racism is just outright banned. Now we are wholesome Catholics, but
yeah, quote unquote racism, because they'll consider anything racist. Like a lot of the Catholics or the trad scene that was covered in the Burton article, a lot of people denounce them as left Caths. That's the online terminology. They'll think anything is like neo-Nazism or racism or anything, because they constantly complain about this magazine called First Things, which is a pretty prominent conservative magazine in America, and it publishes really benign stuff. There's it's not even close to anything like Breitbart, much less the dissident right. And they'll constantly talk about how it's like a neo-Nazi like publication, because they simply say we shouldn't have open borders. So there is yeah.
It reminds me of what E. Michael Jones said talking about America, that there are only 3 races in America that matter. The only 3 ways to divide America demographically is into the Protestants, the Catholics, and the Jews. And generally, it's always been a struggle politically between the Protestants on one side and the Catholics and the Jews on the other, where the Jews run the money side of the politics, and the Catholics gather up the numbers to the voting booth. And I think that's a pretty good analogy. It meshes with my own personal understanding of kind of how this works. When you see the Republican Party, what kind of white people tend to vote for it? You see the biggest, I think Alternative Hypothesis did a whole video about this, about generally the white people who tend to support the Republican Party the strongest come from the most Protestant countries. You see Swedes, Norwegians, Germans, Englishmen. White people who tend to support the Democrats oftentimes come from Catholic countries, anything from Ireland, France, Italy, Spain, and so forth. It's a clear divide still. I don't purport to know the exact ins and outs, why the difference in denominations from Catholics to Protestants tend to show themselves often so clearly in politics, still to our day, but there's some correlation here working.
Well, I would to go on that would be sort of accurate maybe in the 1940s. It's not necessarily accurate now. I mean, white Catholics and white mainliners have by every polling and voting are voting practically the same. White mainliners are still a little bit more voting for GOP than white Catholics, but by a few percentage points. I mean, white evangelicals are the most right-wing demographic by religion. And of course, most Jews are still voting Democrat. But it's not necessarily a division based on religion anymore. I mean, most mainline Protestants and mainline and normie Catholics feel that there's no difference between them. There's not really separation. They're all in the suburbs. These ethnic enclaves that E. Michael Jones talks about don't really exist anymore. And they're all just kind of one together. I mean, a lot of the converts are coming from this kind of bland Christianity, which it doesn't really matter whether it's mainline Protestant or suburban Catholic. It's virtually, with a few differences, they're having the same experience. They probably believe in the same things, and they're likely voting for the same party. there's not that much of a political difference. I mean, there are some mainline Protestant denominations that are just SJW outfits, or well,
yes,
not SJW is a little 2016 moment, but there are just like left-wing outlets like the Episcopal Church is just all they care about is gay rights and immigration. Unitarian Universalists, a lot of these mainline denominations are just totally liberal. There is a difference. There is still a divide between evangelical and this kind of middle class experience, but they all are pretty much voting for the same pattern. And the Democrats primarily depend now on totally secularized whites who will either they'll put no religion, or maybe just like non-denominational Christian or something like that. They're largely secular. If you look at the numbers of like atheists and agnostics and people who say no religion, it's like every one of them, every group is like over 65% voting for Democrat, and it is like a larger demographic now than at any point. But it's like a growing part of the American population is Catholic, is Hispanic, and there is a divide in their voting patterns between white Catholics and Hispanics. And
that I can believe.
Especially with black. I mean, most blacks are also Protestant, and they're going over 90% for the Democrats. So it's not necessarily a religious divide. It's primarily ethnic and racial and class that's starting that, because most people who are assimilating to the upper middle class, whether they're white or Asian or Hispanic, they're becoming more and more Democrat.
Yes. Maybe that, what was I going to say? My thought regarding to the just the idea of converting to Catholicism, to me it sounded, before I came to Twitter, converting to another denomination of Christianity was as unheard of and just frankly weird as tattooing your face. It's something that just very, very weird people engaged with who weren't very well.
Do you think that's a European thing? Because in America, it's very normal to change denominations.
Yes,
like even my family history, we've throughout my family, we've changed denominations. It's not necessarily been like it's more like whatever the closest church is nearby. It's a very common American phenomenon for people to change their denomination. But I feel like in Europe, it's very strange if like your family's been Catholic for, several generations, and then you decide to be an evangelical. I feel like that'd be considered very weird among Europeans.
Yeah, in America, my view of how Americans handle Christianity or religion sometimes in general is that it's just a smorgasbord that they go and pick, whatever. It's like going to Subways and what toppings do you want on your denomination sandwich? Just pick whatever, bro. And it seems such a laissez-faire approach to religion that is completely alien to me, because we come from a culture where we've had here in Finland just one denomination in the realm, and that's it. Everybody has to go to church. There's the reason it was imposed top down is so that there shouldn't be any discord amongst Christians because of the hockey blazer phenomenon. When you can believe pretty much the same thing on all important points, but because you're wearing the team Catholic shirt and the other guy is wearing the team Lutheran shirt, you're gonna start competing with each other, hating each other's guts, and then there's gonna be trouble between Christians. So the king just decided, we're not gonna do this. We're not going to have these pointless squabbles, so we're just going to do one denomination, and everyone's going to be fine with that. And since we have that tradition coming from that, it doesn't come into anybody's mind of just flipping denomination. It's like I don't know, transitioning from one gender to another. It's like that big of a leap. It's unthinkable.
Yeah, I'm trans. I've changed denomination.
Yes.
Well, no, I understand that. In America, it's a much more individualized experience. It doesn't. A lot of these churches are not connected to, family in place. I mean, Americans move around all the time. They're not necessarily keeping as, connected it to their roots as maybe as Europeans are. And so people just like, it's like an individual experience of like, I've researched my religion and I've decided to go with it. I would say in some ways it's like political party, but it's less divisive. Like people don't really, like a lot of the like E. Michael Jones types and a lot of these trads like to emphasize that like there's like religion still divides America, and it really doesn't. Evangelicals are the only ones in America, and it's like a very small segment of them who still care about, are anti-Catholic and really do care if you're like Catholic or Mormon or something. Mormonism, there is like more antipathy among kind of normal Christians, even though it's beginning to lessen more and more. So there's not really this the religious divide in America is not there, because it's almost like people are just shopping at different stores. It's like, oh, you go to the Methodist church, well, I go to the Catholic church, and it has that same connotation. Like people are not going to care about that. Even though when I was a kid, I grew up in the South, and there was like a lot of very dedicated evangelicals and Southern Baptists who would, I was raised Catholic, who would get like, oh, you're Catholic, they're like pagan, they're worshiping Mary as a goddess, this is outrageous, like how could you do this? So there's still like a little bit of that, but most suburban life and most experience the whites are going to experience in America, it's not going to be, they're not going to really experience these religious divides. And going to this point, back to what I was saying, that in the article it's trying to claim that this very niche brand of Christianity that's emphasizing veils and high liturgy and traditional music and everything like that this might be the future of America. It's like very, very it is growing in a way, and it's due to more of the Catholic Church relaxing some of the standards on having Latin Mass and everything like that. And there is a specific demographic that is going to it, but it's far smaller than how big evangelicalism and evangelical churches are the complete opposite of high liturgy. You'll go there and there'll be like a rock band on stage. There'll be no sign that you even know that the pastor is there. Like I went to a recent one, a evangelical service, a few months ago, and the whole service was just a band playing the whole time and singing songs, and then they'd have a speaker come up. And then when the pastor came up, you didn't know it was the pastor. It was like totally egalitarian. It was trying to wipe away any sign of a hierarchy and traditions that a lot of these weird Christian Twitter types want. And there was like a ton of people there, and most of them were young and normal and everything like that. It was like, respectable middle-class types. And this is what most Americans are going for with their Christianity. Does Finland have a large evangelical
no,
movement?
Thank God. No, not like that. Not like that. No. See, the mass I attend on Sundays is still like it's in a big, pretty brick and mortar church, not Gothic, but something similar, and it's I would say to an American evangelical, it would be reminiscent more of a Catholic mass than it would be of anything that they have going on. We have all the vestments and the gold and all the singing and hymns. So it's much more high church, similar to what Catholics are up to in their churches, than anything like that. No rock bands, at least where I'm going. No rock bands, no kitsch, like low church fucking
people waving their hands and like singing in unison. It's like a pop song or something like that.
I would cringe so hard I might actually combust if I would have to ever attend something.
I might surprise you, even though I grew up Catholic. I went to type of what they call guitar masses when I was growing up as a kid. We had an electronic drum set. Everyone's like playing guitars. Like they did the Apostles' Creed as like a rock song, and everyone, like every part is like, we believe, and you put your hand up is like, we believe, like after like every part. And it's like they like did like the Apostles' Creed as this. I hated it as a kid, but a lot of middle-class Catholics enjoy this and far more enjoy the guitar masses than they enjoy Latin Mass. It's not even a comparison. There are a lot more if people who attended Latin Mass started their own denomination. They would be one of the largest Protestant denominations in America. I think it's at least 100,000 Catholics claim to attend a Latin Mass. It's hard to figure out the numbers, but that is like a pretty sizable denomination on its own. It would not necessarily be one of the largest ones, but it'd be about the size of Anglican dissidents, people who've left the Episcopal Church. So it would be like a pretty respectable size. But the people enjoy like guitar masses and have no idea that the church opposes birth control and all these traditional edicts that the weird Catholic Twitter is upholding. They're not into it. And they're also probably more likely to be conservative. Like if they were told that they have to have like open borders and like they have to have these weird socialism and this person with blue hair and a nose ring and somehow in a veil, they'd be like, what the hell is this weird? What is this weird shit? I don't want this in my church. So there is it's a very American phenomenon. And
yes,
the one funny thing I want to point out, that I don't know if this ever happened in Europe, but the article was saying like the future of Christianity is punk. Oddly enough, there was a huge punk phenomenon when I was growing up as a kid that was strongly associated with evangelicalism. Christian hardcore was like a major music phenomenon when I was like a kid, when I was like in high school. Like bands like Under Oath, Chariot, Norma Jean were selling tens of thousands of records. They were selling out auditoriums, even like otherwise secular metalcore bands like Killswitch Engage, As I Lay Dying. They had Christian lyrics and they always emphasized that they were Christian. And it was very much an evangelical thing because it was like, God is not judging you. God is all about love. And they would even their shows would sometimes resemble like a tent revival with screaming vocals and obnoxious breakdowns. And this was like as I keep saying, this is a very major thing in the mid to late 2000s. And it was very much tied to evangelicalism. And this had like even like the goofiness of this, of like the Christian heart metalcore. It had like hundreds of thousands of kids were kept into this. Those kids, like in 20 years before, would have been listening to Slayer, more anti-Christian bands. But now these kids were listening to like Christian bands who were emphasizing a very personalized, individual religious experience that was totally different from Tridentine Catholicism and High Church Anglicanism. And this was like punk. A lot of them, like even in my hometown, a lot of these kids had like Christian hardcore crews. Making sure violently intimidating everyone to make sure they're straight edge and everything like that. Evangelicalism has been very good at creating a counterculture in America, as like evidenced by this, that this was a very popular music that otherwise kids who were probably not evangelicals were like listening to it because they wanted an aggressive music.
Yeah, and that shit would never fly over here. That not in a million years. It was seen as that Christian rock music was seen as sort of the apex of the trashiest and cringiest of American culture. When I was very young, that was like a linchpin of Bush era, like cringe. Who across the political spectrum here, everyone could agree that this was in such bad taste that liberals had a field day making fun of it, and Christians generally wanted to die inside and pretend it didn't exist. I like to imagine sometimes that it has to do, this is my personal take on it, is that similar to how our churches don't have much art in them, we don't like to, we don't do a lot of icons or painting the walls in our churches. A lot of things like talking about religion in day-to-day life, it's very much frowned upon as in something which is so holy and is so above the human mundane experience, is only vulgarized by being put into human culture, human art and music, in a sense, especially when it's pop music. And in a sense, to keep the holy sacrosanct, you avoid to taint it, to vulgarize it in any way, even though it's with well intent, it loses value, it loses meaning by being made into a product or made into something physical or consumable. This is why, in a sense, just seeing religion as something to be picked as a choice like that is also, it's seen as vulgar in a sense. It's something you should refrain from doing, and going out there saying, I'm Christian, we're Christian, God loves you, that is very kitsch, and it's not going to win you any real converts around these parts.
In America, like Christian rock was it was routinely mocked, but this particular scene they were kind of innovators in their particular music style. Like, I don't think they were necessarily ripoffs of another band. Like a lot of Christian rock, from like Stryper is like a famous example. They were just like clear ripoffs of better bands. Even though I hated this music in general, whether they were Christian or not. When I was a kid, I was into much more better forms of metal. We'll get into that in a bit. But there was not necessarily like a Diet Coke. It's always like Christian rock has been perceived as like a Diet Coke, as like the Splenda version of rock music that you don't actually want it. There was like mock, but the evangelical counterculture, most of what they produce is mock, but it's very popular. Like, there's also all these evangelical movies that come out, such as God's Not Dead, which I saw the original, and it's like really bad movie. It's like an incredibly corny, cheesy movie. But this was like a blockbuster hit, like in America. Like there's a huge audience. They have built a counterculture in a way that a lot of people, in dissident right politics, or even definitely weird Christian Twitter, want to build this like alternative culture. And evangelicals have already done it, but it is, as you said, kitsch. It's really corny, but it's a populist air to it, that it's not really building high culture that like you can show off to your secular liberal friends. Like, nobody's secular liberal is going to enjoy God's Not Dead. And I actually do want to I want to push back at something you said, that like this could never happen in Finland. I watched a documentary about heavy metal in Finland, which we're going to get into this a little bit. I watched it about 10 years ago, and they did show a Lutheran service that was like a metal Lutheran service where the pastor was wearing like a button-up flame shirt that something like Ari or somebody would wear, and it's like he's got these spiked hair, and they're got like a metal band playing at the service, and they're all teens. So I don't want you to get away from mocking America when Finland is also engaging in this cringe. But we will get to the metal phenomenon in a little bit at the end of the program. But what do you think? There's there's so many differences between Europeans and Americans, and I think one is like when it comes to religion, as you were exploring before. What do you think the average young person in Europe, their relationship with Christianity is? We always hear that about this is the really secular continent, that everyone there is just like giving up on God. What do you think the average young European is in their faith?
Well, for one, it's very hard to gauge, because the attitude Christians in Europe tend to have, when I'm talking to people, I can sometimes, I don't, until I've talked to them for like a month, I get to hear from one of their comments that I figure, oh, you're Christian. I could never have told, because the dominant, should I say, the dominant religion in the world is just atheism here, or agnosticism. Just generally don't talk about it, and in polite society you don't mention it. So you wouldn't tell if a person is Christian or not. It's such a private thing. You don't really have that same culture as you have in America with regards to religion, because when I meet Americans and they're Christian, they let everybody know about it. Usually, like in the opening conversation, Twitter bio. In the Twitter bio, or like they're very open. It's like when you meet an American, from my perspective, it's like they're setting off fireworks behind themselves, and the American flag said, "Yeehaw! I'm Christian! Yay!" It's so over the top that it always kind of shocks you, because in a polite society here, you don't do that. You're on the low key. So it's hard to say. There's just the only way you can really gauge how religious people are is by these anonymous gallops that say that 10% of the population attend mass regularly, but I think it's in Finland we have like 55% of people pray semi-regularly, and that's the best way to gauge religiosity.
And that's a pretty high number. I think I've looked at places in Eastern Europe. I mean, a lot of people talk about how Russia is returning to traditional Orthodoxy. I think it's well below 50% and who pray daily. I think it's like something like 30%, and only I think less like 6% attend mass regularly, even though everyone's saying Russia is the bulwark of the new bulwark of Christianity. Yeah, if 55% of Finns are praying daily, that's a pretty high number in Europe.
I think in the study they said regularly, which was I'm not sure, but was it like once a week that they pray? That was the definition. But the people who answered that they believed, and this is the crux to me, that they believe that Jesus died for our sins and was resurrected. Because there are people who are nominally Christian who say they don't believe in the resurrection, which I personally don't understand how you square those two. But in either case, it was about, was it a quarter or 1/5 of the population? I'm not 100% sure on those numbers, but that's the ballpark.
Yeah, and that's the basic tenet of Christianity, is that you have to believe that, and if only. So what are they praying to?
I don't understand this. Like, there's what it has to do when you live in a completely secular society, and from top down, the government, the media, and culture, and your peers always, when religiosity is mentioned, it's generally seen as you counter it with these 2008 atheist comments, like something some amazing atheist or Dawkins would say. If God's real, why do bad things happen? It's
Christianity starts every war ever started. They'll say
that level. That's the public dialogue, right? And if you want to, and the only times you'd hear discussions that would be somewhat favorable to Christianity, those were the ones you're having in one-to-one in somebody's living room, or in a private conversation. But in the public sphere, it's just that cringe atheism, or just being agnostic, like neither against it nor for it, just having absolutely no feelers or opinions on it whatsoever. That's the dominant culture just across the spectrum. And when a lot of people, their only connection to Christianity is through their family. Like, usually when I meet other Christians, that go-to story is that, yeah, my parents are very believing, or my cousins are very believing, and I've been to church and stuff, but I'm not. Well, you have this sort of reservation because you don't want to be that guy, that Christian, because then your thoughts goes to the American. Yeah, I'm Christian. Why aren't you Christian? And then you cringe and you think, I don't want to be that guy. And you play low key. I'm I've attended church some. Yeah. You see what I'm saying?
Anti-Americanism is responsible for secularism. I like this. Like, they have to do the opposite of what Americans are like. I mean, even we have growing secularism in our country. Far fewer people are attending church and everything like that, and less people are praying. It's still in the public discourse. Cringe atheism is still widely mocked, and is not is looked down upon, for good reason. I think that's good, but even the left has to appeal to Christianity, but their Christianity is God loves you even if you don't believe him, that atheists can be better people than Christians. God is just all about like open borders, and the left has been very good at this. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC, as we always like to call her, she uses this new, Christian rhetoric for her policies that like Jesus would want us to have Medicare for all. Jesus would want us to welcome every immigrant who comes here. Jesus would want us to love trans people. And this is how they, in the discourse, the left is far better at weaponizing Christianity than the right is right now. I mean, which is like a, big change from the mid 2000s when George W. Bush won presidential election in 2004 by promising to have a constitutional amendment banning gay marriage. Of course, that never happened. And less than 10 years later, or like 10 years later, it's legal throughout the country, and you can't even question it. Christianity was on the side of the right. Yeah. But now it's like both the left and the right, have to appeal to Christianity for the rhetoric, and nobody really wants to hear the late 2000s, like Richard Dawkins and Bill Maher takes on religion. It's always like frowned upon. It's like, oh, I don't like that. I think it's because Democrats and liberals have figured out that it's much better to exploit Christianity for their own purposes, rather than, turning into like saying like God sucks, or saying something like that. That's more fitting for a 13-year-old.
Yeah, I still feel so bad. This is why I can't talk about politics with my peers anymore, because it makes me feel so bad when I hear them talk, and all they do is they talk as if they were American Democrats from the year 2004. Ha! Fox News, am I right, guys? Ha! Cringy American Christians, am I right? Ha! That's it. It hasn't evolved. We're that far behind still, because our media,
the Daily Show starring Jon Stewart is still airing in Finland. That's it.
Yes, exactly. And I have friends who watch that, and I cannot believe how they can stand that absolute trash of a show. It's our media doesn't have like foreign correspondents anymore. They just have like a web browser open for one guy, and he reads whatever what's it called, NSBC, what?
SNBC.
Yeah, and like whatever, NPR, whatever American outlets, and Washington Post, and then they copy paste that and write articles and publish news stories. And so we have like these weird American phrases that don't work in our own language, and it's clearly just copy paste translation. Anything from gender binary to post-structural white supremacy. Nobody here knew what the white race is before this whole thing blew up in America, and they started coming over here via our media, who's just copying the Washington Post and publishing their own articles. It's just clear plagiarizing. If you're talking in Finnish about the white race as in either the oppressor, the bad guys, or if you want to go as the ethno-nationalist, the alt-right, as our people, the white race. Either case, when you say that in Finnish or Swedish or any European language, it's like driving a garbage truck through a china shop. It's so ill-fitting. It's so foreign. Like, nobody's going to take you seriously. So you have this sort of divide where our media becomes very alienated from the people they're talking to, because you have to be very, very online in order to understand and be in the mindset of essentially another country, so that the things that you're talking about make any sense. And the media does this because they're constantly online, because that's where they get their news from. So for them, it makes sense, but to regular viewers here, regular readers, media consumers, they're just talking babagook. Doesn't make any sense.
That's the same here. I mean, even though we're not plagiarizing Finnish articles, I guess, but it is like very alienated. They're talking about their own concerns, and we keep seeing this. Like, several Democratic presidential candidates tailored their message to journos who are extremely online. They're talking about like, their gender pronouns and their bio, and they were, wanting to ban all guns, and how like we need to delete President Trump's Twitter account. Like they thought these were like winning issues among the people, and all these people who tailored their message to extremely online journalists, had to drop out. They got nowhere. Well, Joe Biden, who I'm pretty sure still doesn't know what Twitter is the nominee. I don't think he knows how to work a computer. He, of course, had no message tailored to this. He just went to and he won. He's the nominee, and he may become president. So we
Joe
have
Biden.
that. Yeah. Yeah, so we have the same phenomenon here. On the last question. Or no, go ahead.
Yeah, just on the flip side, if we're going to tie this into the other subject matter we're going to talk about, on the flip side, when alt-righters who come out of this super online, environment, who've been learning everything you need to know about politics on image boards and SciTube, and then they come in and they come as well. Their mind is like on another continent when they're talking about our race and the ethnofuturism. And I'm like one guy said at the Ethnofutur conference in Tallinn, he said like, I'm a fascist and I'm proud of it. And it's like this guy has had his mind warped by Paul memes for so long, and he's gotten into politics and was a member of the Finns Party youth organization, and it was caused a huge media storm and similar things like that. These people who have just very zealous, very ideological, but have their talking points don't resonate with anyone who doesn't come out of their super online media environment, where they're only reacting to the super media consciousness and what their left-wing stuff that they're spewing out, and they're replying to it with these alt-right talking points that pretty much very good, very logical, very intelligent counterpoints to everything these leftists have to say, but it doesn't resonate with anyone because it's not clear-pilled enough. It doesn't have anything to do with anyone's real lives, and it's just babagook again. So they get thrown out of the youth organization, they have their political careers ruined, and essentially they accomplish nothing. So it's what was I trying to say again?
We were just talking about the True Finns, and this is the True Finns youth group, which we'll talk about that in a second. And I want to carry on this point about this extremely online, counterverse to the with the right wing. And a very popular idea on the online right is this idea called Pan-Europeanism. And you've criticized this a lot on your Twitter account. Yes. Pan-Europeanism calls for all Euros to overcome their ethnic and national differences and unite as one people. This idea is very popular among the French New Right and identitarian groups. People like Guillaume Faye dream of a European superstate stretching from Lisbon to Vladivostok. But does this actually have any appeal to Europeans? Do you think any Europeans are like, yes, we're ready for Pan-Europeanism? Because this is a very popular idea among seemingly among American right-wingers, which I'm not quite sure why they're so concerned with this, because we have different concerns.
Two groups of people generally that would be very much in favor of that in Europe. The first group would be capitalists who love the thought of making the movement of goods, services, capital, and workforce flow more evenly over a larger area, bringing everyone together. Those are the main proponents. And the second group who work the hardest to achieve this are the Belgians. And that's the only thing you need to know about the Pan-European movement as it exists currently.
The Belgians, they're up to no good again.
The way they unrepentantly, just brazenly support Pan-Europeanness is just so it's revolting to me, the way they fly that European flag as if it was their own. And I still sort of look with disdain on the European flag, the EU flag, when it flies here in Finland as well. I don't think that we need to fly any other country's flag in our own country. That's it's sort of like a little poking you in the eye of sovereignty. I don't like it at all. The whole point is the part of removing this nationality is the crux that I can't get over. You want to remove, because the argument I've heard from it, the worst one is like, no more brother wars, no more fighting, no, all white people are as one together. It's like, how is this any different from, John Lennon, like singing, like, Kumbaya, everybody holding hands.
Yeah, imagine a world with no brothers wars. It's the right-wing cover of Imagine.
This is like the people who, the reason people fight for something is because they love it. They love their families, they love their country, they love their religion. And this idea, a very pernicious idea, what I always have thought as the real enemy, is this idea of just get rid of everything, every identity which people love and feel like makes up part of their personality, that they'd fight for. Because if people have nothing to fight for, then we'd have no more wars, right? Just take away people's countries, take away their religion, take away their genders, take away their family, everyone, strip them, make them just units in a large blob, and I despise it. The Pan-Europeanness comes from a very, very bad place. Now I have a Chesterton quote here pulled up. Just let me read this. This is his take on Pan-Europeanism. Quote, under Christianity, Europe, while remaining a unity, has broken up into individual nations. Patriotism is a perfect example of this deliberate balancing of one emphasis against another emphasis. The instinct of the pagan empire would have said, you shall all be Roman citizens and grow alike. Let the German grow less slow and reverent, but the Frenchman less experimental and swift. But the instinct of Christian Europe says, let the German remain slow and reverent, let the Frenchman may the more safely be swift and experimental. We will make an equipoise out of these excesses. The absurdity called Germany shall correct the insanity called France. End quote. And that's what I believe in. That's the real Europe, which I envision is this juxtaposition of paradoxical natures living within this loosely stitched together entity known as Europe, where there's a very distinguished and different nature and ethos between the different nations, where there is no one overarching superimposed sort of identity or culture down on it. That's what I believe in.
You would say that this is primarily like Pan-Europeanism as an actual like idea that's popular with people is only popular with the center left, because the Belgians aren't necessarily known for being the Belgians who are being very pro-EU aren't necessarily far-right nationalists.
No, and they're even less known for being a real nation. The only reason Belgium exists is because part of the lowlands refused to convert to Protestantism. They remained Catholic, and that's why you have Belgians today. But
it's divided between Francophone speakers, the Walloons, and the Flemish.
I don't care. Give the country to the French or the English. I wouldn't care. Just I do not like. Jettison Belgium into outer space. Like anything's a good solution, better than the current status quo.
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of people always criticize the Dutch, but I guess the Belgians get thrown in there as well for critical appraisal. And one thing is the only right-wing group I think that is, or one of the most powerful right-wing groups that does have a pan-European vision is, oddly enough, the Azov regiment in Ukraine, which they're primarily known for fighting a brothers' war in Donbass against Russians. And they also don't have good, they also don't like Poles. They have like animosity with the Poles because they see Stepan Bandera as a hero, and Bandera, of course, committed numerous war crimes against Poles. So they and it's the same in all throughout Eastern Europe. Is like Eastern Europe has all these like nationalists who are taking power, but they primarily hate whoever their neighbor is. Like all these Hungarians hate the Romanians hate the Hungarians. Poles, of course, hate Russians, and they also have problems with Ukrainians, even though not nearly to the extent of Russians. And it's the same with the Baltic countries. Like the Baltics have like these very far right nationalist parties getting into parliament, and their main concern is like expelling all Russian immigrants and like preparing for the eventual war with Russia. And most Pan-Europeans outside of Eastern Europe envision like Moscow as like the leader of this Pan-European Union, but all these Eastern European nationalists who pretty much agree with everything the right-wing Pan-Europeans support, vehemently hate Russia, and that's their main enemy. So it's just never going to work out in our regard. And I'm not sure why like American right-wingers make a big deal about it.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that the Americans are tend to be the biggest culprits of this mindset when they seem to project their own position and their own culture onto Europe, which makes for a very ill-fitting and frankly, not truthful representation of Europe at all. And then, they firmly believe in this projection of Europe as a quote-unquote white continent, as something monolithic, which it isn't, not to us, because being white, and it's a very unfortunate choice of words, to be honest, because I say American. When I say American, what I mean to American speakers, it's white. It's the group of white people who live in America and share in American culture. That's Americans. They're an ethnicity, same as Poles are something foreign to me, or Italians. And the overarching like white race sort of thing that just doesn't exist in my frame of experience. And that argument that, oh, if you'd live in Baltimore, dude, then you'd see what it means to be white. It's like, we have black people here too, man. This trust me, and it doesn't really work that way. I mean, I still have this more local, shall we say, more regional, ethnic bond identity, which I can really see as this is part of who I am. This is part of my identity, and it's sort of like, the word white. It's just an American thing, and so because of that, Pan-Europeanism doesn't have that component. I can see if you're an American right-winger and you believe in that sort of thing, then you can sort of see as Pan-Europeanism as being a solution, as being a viable option. But because Europeans don't see it, there's no appeal or not much appeal on the European right for any sort of Pan-European project. The closest thing we've had to a Pan-European project would be before Christianity split. I'd say when everything was more or less one church in Europe. That's the last time we had.
We still had, and there's still like several wars, and there's also a high degree of cultural diversity. I mean, and like in France, there was like several different dialects of French. I mean, even separate languages, and it was very hard for these people to understand each other in medieval France, even though technically the whole continent did see itself as Christendom, but there was high level of decentralization, high level of cultural diversity within Christendom. And it wasn't necessarily unified. It was certainly not a unified super state, but it would answer the calls if the Pope, was saying that Christendom is under attack. We need warriors, and the aristocratic warriors, of course, would answer that call and go and fight on a crusade or any other type of mission. So they could call upon unity in that regard. But it wasn't a super state.
There was a clear political divides and cultural divides, which wasn't interfered with. And if you can keep the only chance you could ever have for any sort of European overarching Pan-Europeanism, it means that it can't interfere with the political or cultural status quo. And when you're giving these tools, you don't have much to work with, especially not in the political realm. You're not going to make a European superstate, because things are going to get very ugly very quickly if you would try to make a United States of Europe over here. And the only way, the practical way you could do that is if one country managed to conquer all the other militarily. That's the only way I can imagine practically. And that would fall apart at this time.
There's a lot of bad things that happened with that years ago, and I don't think anybody wants that. I mean, like, if you want millions dead and like entire countries ruined, I don't think anybody wants that. It's like nobody wants genocide, but that there is. And even they who are wanting that admitted that they had to do this in order to create a united Europe. And I don't think, I think people would prefer to just have their own countries rather than having, being wiped out or being forced to speak another language or pretend that they're another ethnic group. And moving on to the Finnish political scene, you guys have a very powerful nationalist party there. They were previously known as the True Finns, but I believe they're now called the Finns Party.
Mistranslation. I think it's the best way to
somebody at
Finnish,
just
the Finns party.
Somebody told me that it's not really meaning like true Finns. It's like there's so many words that don't like from other languages that don't translate into
because their name is perussuomalaiset. Suomalaiset meaning Finns, and the word perus can mean a lot of different things. Like it can mean true, original, or just basic.
Base Finns. I like that. That should be their
well, just the basic Finns. They're the salt of the earth. The normal ones. That's how they portray themselves. But the word has many meanings.
It'd be like Middle Americans. If there was like a Middle American party, it would have the same connotation. Okay, so I understand that. And I was reading it. It's either the first or second biggest party in Finland. Of course, it's not in a coalition. You guys you're led by an awful government. Of course, awful stands for affluent, white, female, liberal. Hopefully most of my listeners know what awful means. But everyone's celebrating it because it had all these like 35-year-old women who are in there. I think the prime minister's kind of cute, and she's all in there. It's like, we got her all-female cabinet. Like, look at this, like Finland rules, and people are like, oh, Finland's got an all-female cabinet. Oh, red and gold. I love it. And so people were talking about that, but actually the biggest party in Finland is, even though it's not, I was just reading an article that it's like nobody's in the 20%, but it's considered the based Finns. What is your thoughts about this party? Can you tell us a little bit more about this party? I mean, there's several different, nationalist parties, but not all of them are equal, and some are worse than others. So, can you explain what your thoughts on the True Finns are?
Well, for the Finns party is, I would say, I think they could definitely be called a based party with the way they handle the Muslim question, as just generally flat out, you can't be Muslim and Finnish. More or less, this is what the standpoint of the founder is, and immigration has to be curtailed, and all of the good stuff. But he's very politically savvy. The current leader, it was founded as a very populist, opportunistic party, and then it was couped, I think, in 2017, where the nationalist side couped. Put their own guy on the leader position. Founder was ousted, and he appointed all his close clique as lieutenants, and they essentially completely changed the makeup of the hierarchy of the party, putting it into the more, instead of, the GOP kind of, where they make big promises and then they never deliver. Those kind of opportunistic guys were pretty much ousted, and it put it on a more hardline right-wing direction. And they did well to position themselves up until the recent parliamentary elections, where I think they came in, was it second? And they didn't get into government, of course, because there was big coalition to keep them out, as is tradition by now. And they've they've managed to play the media angle in their favor better and better over time. They've become more media savvy. They've understood how to not be, being super hardliner on immigration and stuff is very unsexy. When you're going into like full, immigrants out of here, they're curtailing those kinds of people out of the party, but there's still, it is, everybody understands what they're about, and the credibility in my eyes has improved a lot by removing a lot of the more slicker, slimier opportunist types out of the party, and they're doing relatively well in the Gallups. They were up to 22% at one point this year, early in the year, making them the biggest party in the Gallups. That was right after the elections. Then they've gone down during the Corona crisis. The founder says, who, if you look at a picture of him, Jussi Halla-aho, he's clearly very like autiste, refined man.
Yeah, I've seen some pictures of him. He's definitely not this intimidating right-wing figure.
No, he is an autiste, and he has like 180 IQ, and he does some very good banter on Twitter, like against journalists and left-wing media personalities that he likes to get into small spits at on Twitter, and he always comes out winning because he's very sharp, and it's so he's the most popular man in you can vote for as a person on a national level. He gets the most votes usually, so he's extremely popular here, and his hard line, like no no lowbrow stuff, just only highbrow hard line against immigration. He's very mature, he's old, he does it in a very respectable way. People love that. People eat that stuff up. He's steering the party in a very good direction. But after he couped the party, a lot of forces, were unleashed in the youth party, and this is about the same time as the alt-right is like coming into full bloom in America, right? You have this huge culture, and in Finland, image board culture is enormous amongst youths. Everybody here and their mother is on some sort of a like 4chan equivalent. So it's, everyone knows the memes, everyone knows the talking points, everyone's heard it. So you have this big group of guys who I would say are very young, hot-headed autists who may be very intelligent and well-read, who have read Evola several times and know exactly what Hyperborean white nationalism means.
That's very important. This is what the basic Finns care about.
Yes, and when you have this sort of this powder keg of these hot-headed young guys who are like very sharp, they're dressing in like old black shirt regalia from Finnish 1920s movements, and they're sort of dog whistling here and there for very, very edgy things. And then you have one or two guys who just go out and like criticize. We have Tuukka Kuru was the first guy who went out and he started like bombastically denouncing the party leadership for their softballing on issues where like, why aren't you like well, he didn't say it in a dumb way, but the results speaks for themselves. But he was like, why aren't you just throwing out all the immigrants already? Like this is, and he got support from the regular crowd of guys who like to post these masochistic videos of a black immigrant beating up a white kid in some shitty neighborhood. It's like, this is the result of multiculturalism. Grr. Yeah. And the people who can manage to regurgitate this terrible right-wing masochistic propaganda over and over and over again, these guys were behind him and nobody else. So the party leadership did what they would do. They have a subordinate who's criticizing the leadership. They get him out because he's an autiste, not a politician. He doesn't know how to play the politics game. So he gets ousted. And what follows is some other guys who are doing their own, who've been looking in the mirror and practicing their Hitler speeches and go out and do that in front of cameras. And what you get is the left-wing media jumping on that and publicizing it everywhere. And it's like, and what they run these smear campaigns where they take the hotheads and their comments and they tie that to the bigger party in order to bring it down. They're playing the long game. And these small guys in the youth party don't seem to have the bigger picture in mind when they're making these dumb statements, and they're bringing everyone down with them because of that. So they get thrown out, and now it's gone like so far that I think our leader is he's doing the same route as the Sweden Democrats did a few years back, where it's just starting a new youth party that's going to be the new official one tied to the party, because you can't absolve the other one, which is its own organization. So he's just starting a new one and saying like, this is our, well, not heir apparent, but you know what I mean, that this is the
our real youth group. And yeah, you brought the Swedish Democrats, and the Swedish Democrats will like I mean, the Swedish media seems to have more of a tradition of like this aggressive Antifa journalism that will like have secret recordings and everything like that. I mean, maybe Finland has that, but I know Sweden does it, of course, because I mean, their most famous cultural export right now is the girl with the dragon tattoos, which is about an Antifa journalist investigating a fantasy neo-Nazi conspiracy. But they'll always have these stories of like, this person said we got to get rid of all immigrants, and then Swedish Democrats kick them out, and they have to like, they always have like this story like, you know, every few months of them just like having a zero tolerance policy. So you're saying the Finns party is adopting a similar tactics?
Well, yes, but I would say they're being relatively smart about this, because none of these guys would have been kicked out because of their views if they had just been able to have, you know, this is the basic like part of politics is you have to be pragmatic. You have to play by the rules of the game. You don't get to change the rules of the game until you win. That's the unfortunate part of it, about it. So when you go in and you're like this, playing your cards this badly, you know, you get thrown out. They'd still be in there, and we wouldn't have this these big expulsions and creating new parties if they'd kept it to themselves. Now, I don't really know exactly how it happened. My friend Chris from Sweden, he knows much more what went down in the Sweden Democrats, and it was a lot more dirty, with, you know, insiders inside the Sweden Democrats secretly recording others to like hope that they say something incriminating, you know, to remove rivals or just, you know, take other people down to get yourself one step up on the ladder. But you know, it's I think that a lot of the guys, I even though they've read a lot of the same stuff that I have and a lot of other guys on the right, I have a hard time sympathizing with them just the way they handled it. It's like they might know a lot more than me on a lot of political issues, and they might even be right on a lot of them, which I might not know much about. But still, the way they went out of their way to lambast party leadership, break ranks, and just give the opposing media ammunition to fire at the larger party, it wasn't a smart move. And you know, the leader of the Finns party, he's just being smart about it, that he's reining in the new party in just to keep this, you know, people going off the cuff, going like shooting their mouth off. You can do that in the party sauna after 4 beers, right?
Yeah,
Keep
sauna,
it there.
of course, you got to go to the sauna because it's in Finland. Yeah,
yeah, that's like after a few beers in the party sauna, then you can make, you know, these statements. Then you can have your fun, man. But you know, there's this is the same thing in every party, and you know, there's terrible things that the youth organizations of the left-wing parties say as well, and it's an embarrassment for the main party there as well. The problem is that the media softballs them. It treats them much more fairly, and it's like too fairly almost. So when the spotlight is on you, and the stakes are this high, and people are out to get you, then you have to really, really be careful. And that's the situation they find themselves in. So it's a sort of balancing act to like not turn ship to say that nationalism bad. We're not doing that anymore. They're not doing that. They're not going that far. But at the same time, they say, okay, guys, you're not going on a camera for the biggest media empire in Finland and saying, "Hail our people, hail the white race."
Yeah,
You're not doing that, all right? Keep it in your pants, man. So that's sort of where we're at.
And a lot of people on the right, especially on the online right, think that if they speak the truth in the camera, there's like immediately like a revolution. It's like, you have to say this, and we can't back away from this. We have to always keep saying this, and there's like no desire for pragmatism whatsoever. And in America, we have a different story. I mean, the Republican Party is a gigantic tent. People aren't really involved in these institutions as well, because I mean, it's like very open-ended. I mean, the college Republicans, every chapter is different. Like, there's not the central organization and hierarchy as you would have in probably these nationalist parties in Europe. And as well, I mean, it's easy to just like take it over, and like you could be running like your own college Republican chapter at some school, and like it could be like based, and there's like another college Republican chapter that's like demanding like unlimited immigration. So you don't really have like these institutions that you're really fighting over here in America, because some people say we shouldn't be involved in any of these institutions. But like several people just think that, just saying like always saying the truth or whatever, even though it might not be the truth, they always have to say these politics openly. And if you're not saying them openly and saying it in the most hostile and politically incorrect way possible, then you're just being a cuck, and you're not. This is a betrayal and treason. But we've seen this happen in America. Like all these people who decided that this is the proper way to go, it ended in disaster in 2017 and 2018. And some of those people haven't learned the lesson from them, and others have.
Yeah.
So I think that's a universal problem on the right, both in Europe and America.
These people are too politically combustible, and if you take them, it's like a big gunpowder keg, and you're making like a part of your organization. It's just a ready to explode at any moment. You never know when, and you have to ask yourself, do I want to bring this guy along on my ship, right? It's for when you're making these organizations, in the end it comes a lot more down to who you let in. This is the important part, that do I really need this guy? Do I really need that guy? People who don't know like basic how to handle civil discourse, who are just spent all his time on the internet. And I've learned all the infographics from Paul by heart. I know all the stats. I know all the crime stats. I know all the 109 bits of information I need to win every debate logically. And when they go with that mindset, where they don't have this, should I say, like, well, it's not even a civil education. It's
savviness.
Just like
they don't have the savviness.
Yeah, they don't have that, the savviness, and they just don't understand when they're overstepping the bounds, and then they take a lot of other guys who might do a lot of good down with them. So, being able to spot those guys and saying, thanks, but no thanks. We don't need you in this organization. Is a very good way of increasing the longevity and the survivability of a political organization on the far right.
Yeah, going on another American right meme is I wanted to discuss is a lot of people in our country and also the UK and elsewhere thinks that Poland is very base, and I believe you disagree with this, that you do not see the Poles as based in red pill. Why do you have this opinion? Why aren't you retweeting base Poland and everything like that?
Oh God! The best Poland, also known as the 51st state of America, is a sort of what I see as the the space that you call Poland is just where I see like the big boot of the American hegemony is resting on in Europe. It's like if Polish people could, they would turn the entire country into one large U.S. air base, and the amount of bootlicking there is just above and beyond. What do they even do with all the money we send them? I have no idea. If you would pack a 16-wheeler truck full of 50-euro bills and send one over every hour over the border from Germany to Poland, that's how much money you're sending to them. Like that. There goes another one, and another one, and another one. And they have no welfare system. Where does the money go, man? It's just a black hole. It's a huge black hole in
better
Europe.
polka music. What are you talking about? They're using it for very good means.
They are great at stealing cars and driving them all the way from either from England or Germany or Denmark, and they always end up in Poland. And if you have big debts, you can always run to Poland because there's no bookkeeping, no loss. I've worked with a bookkeeping firm, and when you do business with Poles, they have debts to pay, they go back to Poland, you're never seeing that money ever again. It's amazing. I don't think they even spend it on anything other than cigarettes. And then they have like this, a friend of mine said this very well, that Polish people are a people who are deathly afraid of holding their own destiny in their own hands. They can't do it. Once they are free to do whatever they do, they want to do, they don't know. They get panicked. And no, I'm solely responsible for myself. They say, please, I need a master. So it goes from Germans to the Soviets, back to the Germans, whatever. You can look back at their history. They literally threw their crown at a Swedish nobleman. Please be our king. Or to Saxon Germans as well. They had a system of always having a foreign ruler on top, so that the Polish nobility could be, instead of squabbling with each other, they could all be unified against the king. He's a foreigner. He's the other, and it's a survival strategy that Poles have adopted, and they still do this today. They have this evil king known as the EU. It's so abstract. The Poles can't abstract to that level. They just view it as a king in their country. And then all the Polish people can unite against their hatred of the ruler. And that's basically Poland throughout all its history. It's just squatting there. It's just draining resources. And they're just generally really, really annoying. And anytime you bring them like high culture, anything, they downgrade it, they bastardize it, they bring it down to the lowest level, and then they steal your car. And then what do you do?
I don't know if we can fact check all of these claims about the poor Poles, but I have a friend who's a German poster on there, and he says many of the same things about Poles. He's like, "Oh no, not the Poles." A lot of Americans don't understand about this Western European antipathy towards Poles, which I guess you've kind of explained it. Whether they're all stealing cars and then selling the car just to buy, a lifetime supply of cigarettes or something. I mean, we're not quite sure if we get this, but I do think it is good to have a more realistic appreciation of Poland, because some people, especially a lot of mainstream conservatives, think that like Poland will have like a new revival of Europe. A lot of like the trads and people who are writing for conservative Catholic magazines imagine that Poland will become like the center of Europe and rule it and make it a more Christian continent, but it doesn't seem like it has the ability to do that. It's so dependent on the EU and America that it doesn't really have the power to rule itself, much less the continent.
There's a big Polish convention for Polish ethnics that takes place in Germany every summer, where they ship over hundreds of thousands of Poles, go over by a bus and truck loads, all gather. And it's called the yearly asparagus picking on the German farms. And they just all come there and pick in the scorching summer heat. They pick fruits, and then they get like €2 an hour, and then they all go home. And that is the peak of Polish cultural expression, and that is also the engine of Polish initiative and the workhorse of their economy. And when the Corona crisis hit, borders closed, the biggest impact we felt when there weren't any Poles around anymore was that German asparagus fields now didn't have anyone to pick them. Oh no! Who is going to fix my toilet now? No!
No Polish plumbers. Polish plumbers, come back. No!
Tobacco shops across the Europe. Car insurers around the continent breathed a sigh of relief as the borders around Poland were closed down, and suddenly, well, anyways, I'll not go that far.
We have a similar. I mean, because all of our farm workers primarily come from Latin America here,
yes.
And we have the same thing where they come temporarily. We have a much more probably screwed up system than maybe in Europe.
The best way to really hammer home what a based Poland would be like for somebody in America to understand the comparison is if with a traditional workers' party and their trailer park commune was a country. That's the best way to describe it.
Well, maybe that might be the case, but we'll have to move on. The poor suffering Poles. I hope I don't have too many Polish listeners. They might get very angry, try to wreak vengeance on me. But to move from poor suffering Poland, they've dealt with enough in their history. Going back to Finland, as I was mentioning this a little bit before, Finland is reputed to be the most metal country in the world. It has the most heavy metal bands per capita, and I believe some prime ministers have delivered speeches at the Tuska Open Air Metal Festival. Blep,
yes.
Does this metal heritage make you proud to be a Finn?
Yes, and I'm sorry to say that I was an outsider during my school years, because I was one of the few people who didn't listen to heavy metal. Like I was
the opposite in America. You're an outsider for listening to heavy metal, not for listening to it.
In my class, pretty much everyone was into metal, and it was just the normal. This was the standard music everyone enjoyed, like Children of Bodom, and for the hardcore fans, down to the really soft,
Sonata Arctica,
rock and roll. Sonata as well. But it's like, when you're not into that scene, you're like an outsider. You're like, what? People talking about music, you got nothing to bring to the table. And I still feel that it's an outsider in my own country culturally, just because it's just not my cup of tea. When everyone else and their mothers listen to hard rock, and we have some heavy metal that's like. It's not that heavy, but it's the same genre, directed to kids. And it's like a kids band, and they dress up as dinosaurs. It's called Heavisaurus, and they have like concerts for kids. We're talking like age, what could it be, 6 to 9, probably. I don't know. But this is like a children's band. They play heavy metal, yeah, in their funny bright dinosaur costumes. And that's a phenomenon. That's like how you're bringing a new generation into the cultural heritage, right? And it lives on. And a good example here, tie it into our previous conversation. The leader of the Finns party, Jussi Halla-aho, if you Google a picture of him as when he's younger, he was also in his similar, like a garage band, heavy metal. You see him with the long hair and the black T-shirt, and
that's based. I like that.
Yeah.
That's like the complete opposite in America. As I was saying, is like it's not in the 80s. was at its like peak of its popularity, but even then, if you were like listening to heavy metal, it was like a D class thing. Like it was like a working class phenomenon. Like middle class kids were not supposed to be listening to metal. They would like listen to, if they wanted aggressive music, they would listen to punk and hardcore. And that was like still the same even in my day. Like I went to a very middle class school, and the worst thing about metal was that it was like it wasn't for our class. It's not. That's like what the poor whites listen, the bad whites listen to. And you know, if you're listening to it, even like a band like, you know, Sonata Arctica and Nightwish are very cheesy and stuff. I guess it's like they're like could be played as like video game music, so that would be like somewhat like, I guess, the chart topping stuff in Finland. If you were like listening to that in America, that would definitely make you like a weirdo. Much less like listening to the harder stuff like the black metal bands from Finland. Like I actually really like a lot of bands from Finland, like Amorphous, Sentence, Impaled Nazarene. They are not a Lutheran metal band.
No.
That they are, but there's like a ton of great metal that comes from Finland and Scandinavia as a whole. And the thought of it just being like the popular music, I guess it would be compared to how rap music now is in America, because even rock music in general is not as popular as it was, 20 years ago. It's not the standard youth music for anybody. I mean, much less, rap music is the standard youth music for everyone, regardless of race. And that's what that's like the standard, like normie music you're going to listen to. You're definitely not going to listen to metal. Like even like some of the harder rock, like newer hard rock is like considered like, not cool to listen to. You might listen to indie rock, which is like the complete opposite of metal. And it is a very weird thought to think of like the cool kids coming in with like Children of Bodom shirts in like high school.
Yeah, well, it was more or less like that. There was it was the given that like the go-to cool music that everybody listened to, at least where I grew up. And it's like there's like divisions where Finland does its heavy metal, and Sweden does, should we say, pop music, anything that you'd hear on Eurovision Song Contest, that sort of stuff. And Norway does house music for parties. Estonia does folk music, and in Denmark they haven't invented singing yet. And it's nice like that. Every country in our surrounding just has like their own niche in music industry. It's very nice.
Denmark has it. Well, Denmark, they're actually well behind in metal bands. They were like a pioneer metal. Like Merciful Fate came from Denmark, and they were a huge heavy metal band. They were pioneering, and they had like a few big thrash bands. But like in terms of death metal, black metal, they're well behind Sweden, Norway, and Finland in that regard.
Don't get me started on Denmark. They are always behind on cultural output.
Of all the Poles who are listening, I'm not going to let you offend the Danes anywhere in this regard. But like heavy metal's big even throughout Sweden and Norway. But the fact that it is like your cultural export, and it didn't even have Finland didn't really have any big bands until I think the early 90s. I think Stradivarius was probably the first like really big band. I mean, Amorphous was another big band. When they were a death metal band, and then they became like lighter. I would think even that they were like far behind Sweden, but now it's just like over the time span of 20 years, it's turned into cool music, and it's something that's like very different. You think that most youth cultures around the West are very similar to America. I mean, even rap music is very big in most of Europe now, which wouldn't have been 25 years ago or so or whatever. But now like people in Germany and France, like standard white kids, are listening to it and making their own German rap music. And in my last episode, we talked about Einar, this popular Swedish rapper who apparently got assaulted by an Arab gangs or something. And this kid doesn't look like a gangster rapper at all, but apparently he's Sweden's most popular native rapper. It is interesting that Finland has taken something that was part of the Anglo-American pop culture, and it's turned it in. And Anglo-America is basically it's a very niche music genre in the UK and America right now. But now it's turned it into like the standard youth culture, and it differentiates itself from other countries. So that is interesting. I actually kind of support this.
Yeah, you can think of.
Could have bullied you. You should have been listening to you should have been listening to heavy metal. Even though the bands I listened to in high school probably were not popular. I didn't never like Children of Bodom and like other stuff, but I thought they were too poser. But the fact that like that's what the cool kids were listening to is mind-boggling.
You can think of heavy metal in Finland sort of filling a similar cultural niche here as anime does in Japan. You know, it would be weird outside, but it's just part of the normal culture at home, and it's also something that's like imported, so to say. Like we didn't invent heavy metal, just as Japan didn't invent animating pictures, but it's something that's caught on and like become its own thing with its own national taste.
All right. Well, I think I may have to move to Finland. That's just a joke. I can never speak the language. I'd like look at your language, and there's like bands who write like lyrics in Finnish. And I'm like, I can't even pronounce this. Like, I can pronounce some stuff in like German, most of the Germanic languages, but like Finnish, I'm just like, not even gonna try.
Latin would be closer to English for you than Finnish would be. But I always say this to friends who ask me, like, Blep, should I try learning Finnish? Should I, I'm interested in the culture. Should I give it a shot? And I always tell them, no, don't bother. It's too hard. You're going to get bored. You're going to give up. So I'm telling you, you're going to save a lot of time by not even trying. So it's too hard. And also, we don't need any more people speaking our language. Just it's good as it is. It's better when fewer people understand it. Then we have our own clique here. That's better.
Right, cool. Stick to all right. So listeners, stick to the Indo-European languages. Don't try Finnish. Don't try Hungarian or anything like that. But anyway, Blep, thanks for coming on. You can follow him at Blep Sama. Hopefully he doesn't get banned again, but that's where he's at on Twitter. So thanks for coming on.
Every 4 months. It was a pleasure. Thanks for having me now.
Thanks, man. And until next time, stay respected.